Hello listeners, I'm Sam with Below the Radar, a knowledge democracy podcast. Below the Radar is recorded on the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. On this episode of the Below the Radar B-Sides, we're joined by Rosemary Georgeson and Jessica Hallenbeck, two artists whose collaborative community-engaged work has produced multiple acclaimed film and research projects. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, welcome to Below the Radar. Delighted that you could join us again this week. We have a couple of special guests with us, Rosemary Georgeson and Jessica Hallenbeck. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, wondering if we can begin with you both introducing yourselves a little bit. Why don't we start with you, Rosemary?
My name's Rosemary Georgeson. I'm a Salish Sahtu Dene woman, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, artist. I kind of do a bit of everything.
My name's Jessica Hallenbeck. I have a PhD in geography from the University of British Columbia. My background is in community planning and filmmaking. I'm currently working as a film producer in Vancouver. And my own family background is my dad's side were early Dutch colonizers to Haudenosaunee territory. And my mom's side were Ashkenazi Jewish from Poland and Hungary and came through Ellis Island, also to Haudenosaunee territory.
There's a lot that I want to talk to you both about, but let's start with your long-term collaboration and working together, kind of how that came to be in the first. So people talk about collaboration all the time in community work and community engagement, community engaged research, but I think what's really fascinating is the sheer length of time you've worked together.
It's never going to end, is it?
No, it's not. When I first met Jess back in 2011, I was working for Urban Ink Productions. Diane Roberts was the artistic director at the time, and we were doing a job up in Williams Lake. We'd been up there for 3 years working with youth to help them find their own stories and ways to share them, looking at their relationship to their land, who they are. It was a big gig that we had up there for 3 years when you're immersed in a town like that. And Jess was up there doing some work, and she'd met Diane somewhere along the line.
Yeah, so at that time I was really wearing my planning hat and was working in Williams Lake to specifically try to see if the city would be open to adopting an equity policy. And the way through to that work was really to work with youth in the community, to bring youth together, to really talk about what was happening in the community, to use photography and photo voice to elicit that feedback. And in doing that work, I had heard that there was another group in town that was also doing work with youth. And I thought, well, there must be a way that we can collaborate instead of redoing what we're doing so that kind of started the process. And I met Rose at Urban Ink one day. Diane said, well, why don't you come down and you can meet Rose, and Rose will decide pretty quickly if we like you or not. So no pressure. And that's exactly what happened.
It was a great collaboration, bringing the kids together, because the kids in Williams Lake the First Nations kids don't get a lot of recognition for stuff. And Jess, being photographer and videographer, brought a whole new element to the work that we were doing up there and really opened up the doors with the kids for something amazing. And they created a beautiful video together. We led the youth through the process of figuring out what they wanted to do, and they wanted to interview elders and learn their stories and connection to the land. And Jess led the video work with that, the film work, and the youth were mentoring with her. And they learned so much about where they were from, who they are. It was a really powerful video. And don't get offended by the name, because people do when I say the name of this project. It was called the Squaw Hall Project, named after an old dance hall that was notorious in the town of Williams Lake. It was on the Stampede grounds. We asked our advisory committee up there if they wanted us to change the name. And on our advisory committee was head of Indigenous relations at the Caribou-Chilcotin Hospital, head of Aboriginal education for the Caribou-Chilcotin area, and a female chief up there. And they all looked at each other and looked back at us and said, no, they named our hall for us. We'll keep the name. So that's why it stayed that name, the Squaw Hall Project. And this is what Jess worked with the youth on to create this beautiful film, the Squaw Hall Project. It's got a library number. It's here in the library system.
Yeah, and that's really that's how Rose and I met. And then it was really through that Rose invited me to be part of the next project that Rose was doing, which was really to take this beautiful community play and turn it into a film. So that's how We Have Stories, Women and Fish was born.
We're working on Women and Fish in 2004 with Marie. It was an untold story, a story that no one knew, that we as women were such a big part of the commercial fishing industry, owning our own boats, running them, raising our kids on them, etc. So there was so many parts of that people didn't know, that there was more to talk about. And I wanted to, it was the first film that I had any inclination into making, and it was to help share some of our stories as women from the water, on the boats, that ran our own boats, that lived that life that everyone thought was just a man's industry. And we've been doing it forever. And finding someone to film and stuff, it was hard back then. That was 14 years ago. And Jess and I just finished working together up in Williams Lake, and I thought, yeah, call Jess, because the film that they created with the youth up in Williams Lake was amazing. It was a beautiful piece of work. And so contacted Jess and said, come on, let's go film some Indigenous women who used to fish and share their stories. And that's where that film came from. That was the first film we did.
I see so many ways into the story. Well, first of all, I grew up in Williams Lake, so I know the town that you speak of. I know Diane Roberts because my friend Heather, who was just in town, introduced me to her when Dan moved to town. So I joined the board of Urban Inc. for a bit, so I know about the work they were doing. And then Jess literally lived like across the street from me. And then I came out to Williams Lake with Nathan and Norma Jean, some of the work that you were doing prior to then. So, wow, 14 years goes by really, really quickly. But of course, later on, yes, you applied to go to UBC. And so then your dissertation was essentially a collaborative project. I wonder if you can share a bit about, I guess, building on this work you'd already been doing.
Yeah, so it's really, so I applied to UBC as a kind of plan B. I wasn't really sure if my film work was going to be successful or not, and thought, well, why not? I can just go back to school. And then I was really fortunate to get a good scholarship. And it was never my plan. It was never my intention to bring any of this work with Rose and our relationship, our friendship, our collaboration into the academy. I really was very resistant to that idea and had proposed an entirely different PhD topic that I defended. But in that process, Dory Nason, who's a professor at University of British Columbia, Dory Nason had invited Rose and I to come and present at an academic conference together. And Rose and I drove out to Saskatoon. And really in that process, we were figuring out how we were going to talk about our work together. And I think, Rose, at one point we were driving, it's like, okay, why don't Jess, why don't you just say what you're going to say and I can say what I'm going to say and we'll just stand in those places and do that. And so that's really how, we started to figure out what our collaboration could look like in the academy. And in driving back to Vancouver, Rose invited me to collaborate for the dissertation. And that was really the first step. Was it came through this invitation, and I feel like you should now jump in.
It was the worst storm that had happened in Alberta in years. It was flooded. And here Jess and I are driving back talking about this. And what she was planning on doing for her dissertation, it was powerful. And we got talking about the history that I was sharing with her. And again, it's another part of history that no one talked about, the separation and breaking of families. So we'd never find each other, part of the government's plan to get rid of us. And it had been effective in my family. My grandfather's family was taken, names changed, etc. And I think talking about this with Jess, it opened up some of her curiosity too. I remember at one point there was research to be done, and she goes, "I'm not a researcher," but she dove into it. And I shared a lot of stories with her in that. And like I said, I think you got interested and kind of curious because we were talking about things, again, that the government had imposed on us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I was always interested, but I was really worried about the potential repercussions, right, of bringing this collaboration and bringing Rose's knowledge and her family's knowledge into the Academy. And it was really Dory Nason who kind of just assured me when I expressed that to her that was precisely why I should be the one to do it, because I was so worried about it, that I would do a good job and make sure that knowledge was kept in Rose's hands and in her family's hands. And so we started a very long process of working together to uncover the stories of Rose's family and that disconnection. And I started a long process of figuring out how I would write about that or not write about it. And I think importantly too, part of that process also involved, I was getting paid through SSHRC grants and other research funding, and Rose was not. And so we also were really determined to really only work together when Rose was also able to get paid. This highly personal project took 8 years. But it was really through Dory and having this incredible support on my committee level that allowed me to write a dissertation that was largely about refusal as a methodology, and write about the archive and omissions in the archive, and push against the desire for the Academy to hold Rose's family story, and also push against the desire of the Academy to, I was explicitly told a PhD dissertation has to be your own original work. You cannot have something that is co-authored. You cannot have something that is collaborative. Rose's name cannot be on the dissertation. So it was really about figuring out bureaucratically how Rose could be there in the dissertation without the university owning that and without that knowledge forming the basis of my PhD.
Learning all this as Jess is going through this. I have grandchildren, grandchildren, great-grandchildren that are coming up through. And they're ready to go on to university and higher education. And I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to do this with Jess, to know what they were going to face, because it's still that check the box kind of thing. They're First Nations kids. To make the space safe for them to go into by the work that we were doing was so important to me, because I hear other people I know going through the system, and it's hard on them as First Nations people. And so the work that Jess and I did together, I learned so much about how I was more of a commodity than a person. And that's something that's since contact, that we're not human. And Jess fought that battle to make me present with the university. Even right down to the day that she presented her dissertation, they weren't going to allow me in the room. That's kind of messed up. It's not my dissertation, it's Jess's. And yet they were still trying to separate me from what Jess was doing, her dissertation. It's still frustrating. when I think about it. And, you know, that, like I said, I have grandchildren that are going to university now, and that they, because they're First Nations, they can face this same kind of crap.
Yeah, wondering, as you went through this partnership, this collaborative work together, and then the structures of academia are what they are. So there's a dissertation part, but there's also in community engaged forms of research, you're saying there wasn't funding that was easily available to be able to pay you as well for the time that you were putting onto the project. How did you both what were the things that came up in terms of the structures that worked against doing this work together?
To do this work with Jess was important because it's stories that need to be told. The fact that I wasn't getting paid for it was offset by the fact that they need to be shared. And somebody has to share it. It has to open a door somewhere. So that's why I wanted to do it so badly, to stay on this path with Jess. Getting paid, well, I didn't really care. It came in handy eventually, but it's the fact that what was done to us, what was taken from us through government policies, etc., the lack of the archives were such a screw up because they only tell what they want to tell. They don't tell the stories. And, you know, looking at the history of my grandmothers in there, just Indian women, they didn't exist. You know, so Jess really had her work cut out for her when she started looking at the balance between this, the research, finding these stories. And it was, a lot of times it was really overwhelming because I didn't know a lot of the stuff that had happened, but it made it more present and real because it was also, Jess knew the legalities of things, the laws and legislations, commissions, etc., that had been put in place to do this to our people. And that was another driving force of wanting to do this work with Jess. And I trusted her. I wasn't going to do it with somebody that I didn't trust. And Jess had my complete trust and faith in what she was doing. And we didn't go through any process without talking it through first. And really, not just talking it through, but sitting with it, carrying it, going back to talking about it again. Sometimes we do this 3 or 4 times. Sometimes we might do it for 6 months, whatever it took, until we knew where we were going with it, both of us.
I mean, I think in terms of the process, we were able to get public scholars funding to be able to pay for some of Rose's time, to also be able to gather on Galiano Island and do this work together, and to also visit. So as we kind of began this research journey, Rose held stories or began to remember stories about where her family may have gone, and we were able to travel to those places. And so there's this part of the dissertation work that isn't written about in the dissertation about that process of finding people and reconnecting and what those stories were that held Rose's family together through 5 generations of disconnection. And so the result of the PhD work was also the result of Rose's lifetime of work of reconnecting with family. And that then led to the postdoc, which, similar to the PhD in a way, the veneer of it was an exhibition on Galiano Island. But the work was really bringing together Rose's newfound family to re-engage in practices and sharing knowledge that hadn't been shared in generations. So it's like in a way, my job was figuring out what the Academy would need, and either acting as a bridge to those things and sometimes as a wall to others, and writing a dissertation that revealed my side of what I witnessed and my side of what I researched, but left a lot out for Rose to share and pick up on or hold.
To share what could be shared, and to hold on to things that shouldn't be. 5 generations of us being broken and going through life, working on the water, working beside my relatives, my cousins, but not knowing who they are, and they don't know who I am. And that's for a few generations now. And it was getting kind of old. And yeah, Jess had her work cut out for her. Like she said, she was the wall that stopped them, the academy, from taking my stories, my family's stories. She also led us to the place where I realized that I couldn't carry the stories anymore. There was too many of them and it was too big. And that's when we came together with all of the family, all of the cousins, because now it's their story. It's not just mine. It belongs to all of us. And it was through sitting and talking with Jess that I knew how to do that. And it gave me the chance to sit and talk about and share our old stories, which opened up my memory, because a lot of it gets lost when you don't use it and talk about it. And those memories came back, the stories of what I would hear my dad and my grandfather and my grandmother talk about and kind of whisper about, so that we didn't hear. So you know that something's always missing and not where it should be. And I was allowed to have voice for it again through the work that Jess and I have done together. And it's still going on. There's still more coming out and more family coming out and people reaching out, because it's undone a bunch of the impact of colonization in a way that stripped us of our rights to know each other. I just did an interview or shared space with my cousin Evan on Galiano, and one of the things we all say to each other is we had a right to know each other. You know, here we're in our 60s, some of us a bit older, but we had a right to know each other, and that was taken from us. And this work has opened that door so we can meet and sit, hang out, have a cup of coffee. We can like or dislike each other. We can do whatever we want. It's our right now. But it wasn't. And this is the change that this work that Jess and I have done together has created.
I'm wondering, in terms of the postdoc work that also led to an exhibition back on Galiano Island, your home, and to share a little bit about what that process looked like and the reception in the community.
Yeah, so that postdoc work was done largely through a postdoc at SFU with Dr. Kate Hennessy, and was supported by a SSHRC Connections grant and a SSHRC Insight Development grant, as well as a Canada Council grant, a BC Arts grant, a Heritage grant. I've become a really great grant writer. And, you know, I'll just share that, like, the container for that was the exhibition. And the container for that, in a way, was the postdoc, which Kate understood really beautifully. And the work that unfolded was, again, the work that was kind of allowed to unfold once we had the container built. What's the work?
What's the work? Jesus. What is the work? All the women in the circle that we all came together and shared our stories, we're all related, but we didn't know each other. We didn't know that in the beginning, and it gave us a space to come together and share our stories of how we're connected, and to come together and start sharing our stories of different places in Coast Salish territory, to bring our youth on board and have them part of it, mentoring with us, learning our stories of connection, stories of colonization that impacted us. That was a powerful few years to see this come together. I've known Kate since she was born. We never knew each other. We always knew who each other was. And to be able to come together and do this work and really get to know each other and both be from Galiano, our connections to people that like she's close with one of my cousins, and all of these relationships came out. And it was really powerful because we were put back together at a time when we could say the things that needed to be said. Nobody's going to get locked up, tossed in jail, or any of that crap. And it was time for just open, beautiful honesty and sharing. And that's with the guidance of Kate and Jess, Roxanne, everybody that was part of the support team around us gave us that space to reconnect and put us back together.
Wow. I'm just going to say that just for a little pause. It's really beautiful hearing about the process and the work and the impact and the connection and the solidarity. Now, you both also contributed a chapter to this forthcoming volume on community engaged research, which took many, many years to get through. So hopefully by the time this episode comes out, it will be out in the world. But I'm wondering if you can sort of share a little bit about that, the writing process of collaborating together in terms of what you're sharing in that exchange with each other.
Go ahead, you start.
Well, the writing process should be a little bit obvious based on our conversation today. So usually what Rose and I will do, and this has been figured out, right? We've spent a really long time figuring out what works for us. And I think, what works for us is that we'll get together and we'll both kind of talk about what we want to talk about, what we're interested in, how we're connecting with what the ask is or what the project is. And then usually Rose will start sharing things with me, and I'll just start typing as she's talking. And I'll type as she's talking, and then I'll go away. We'll both go away, and I'll do more research. Like I'll kind of think more critically about what Rose and I have talked about in the context of, my own tradition, which is like a Western academic tradition that engages in critical theory, and then I'll write something, and then Rose and I will come back together, and I'll usually read that piece of writing out loud. And then Rose will comment on it and share stories and bring her voice alongside it. And I'll type it. And that's kind of, and then it just follows as an iterative process. Rose will also then go through what's written and do more writing and make comments. But that really is how, from all that time ago in Saskatoon, we figured out which makes sense, which is really sitting in our own ways of knowing and understanding and our own ways of communicating. So that's also how this article or chapter is written. Now your turn.
It's called The Elephant in the Room because I just gotten pulled over by the cops. I didn't swing into the inside lane when I made a left-hand turn. I went into the outside lane. So they followed me for about 6 blocks and pulled me over. And first response out of the cops when I put my window down was, "How much have you had to drink today?" Geez, you're rude. And some friends of mine had been pulled over by the cops a couple days prior to that. And they said, "Oh, he was so pleasant and so nice and just so kind." And I, holy crap, you just got pulled over by the RCMP and he's wishing you a good day. And he's mad at me because I'm not drunk. And that's a big contrast between non-Indigenous and Indigenous people and the way we're treated by the cops. And when Jess and I started working on this paper, that had just happened. And I was a little pissed about it. And I was telling Jess about it, and that's how we came to the name The Elephant in the Room, the things that we don't talk about. And it was from that moment when those RCMP pulled me over, demanding to know how much I had to drink. And I think it pissed him off because I said nothing in 25 years, officer.
I wanted to thank you for sharing that. I wanted to talk. You're both involved in so many other things besides your collaborative work together. I know, Rosemary, you were recently involved with Diane again around the Heart of the City Festival, and Jess, you're involved in a band called the Salt Licks. So I'm wondering if you could both share a little bit about these pieces of your life.
Oh, the Salt Licks. Well, I hope you're going to play some of her music. So the Salt Licks was created really for people who... Okay, actually, I'll start at the beginning. So one day I was biking to UBC as I was doing my PhD, and I thought, fuck, I'm always seem to be dating people who are in bands, and I've never been in a band, and I want to be in a band. So I got off my bike, and I just texted people I knew. And I asked them, okay, have you ever been in a band? Nope. Do you know how to play any instruments? Nope. Great. You want to be in a band? Yep. And that's how it started. So we ended up being a band mostly made up of people at that time who were doing their PhDs or in academia. And I think for a lot of us, it became this way for us to kind of gather and support each other through this very long process of becoming academics, in many cases becoming moms, and in just getting together and having fun, but also writing songs that are fun and funny and also political. And in that process, learning, well, some of us got to learn how to play instruments. I was the last one to choose what I wanted to learn. And at that point, everybody had picked all the instruments. So I got to be a really shitty singer.
I heard a bit of your music
Yeah.
that day. Kate played it. You were not.
Well, Kate is a great singer. She can carry a tune. I can't. And so I told them for my songs, we have to play punk music because that's
Is
the
it a song
only...
about the dryer and laundry, or was it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you give me a little?
A dryer, like the how could you see, I'm so bad under pressure. I don't even
Well, we've got
how
the clip.
could you shrink my clothes? I don't remember. Something like that.
I want to hear all of it now. Yeah, I've been working with Diane since she came on as AD at Urban Inc. in 2008. So is that 16 years I've been working with her doing arrivals. It's one of my favorite projects because it's opened the door for a lot of the work that Jess and I do together, and the research and understanding a lot of the history of what happened through colonization, the impact on our people, separation of families, loss of relationships, all of that. That's just one of the projects that I'm on. Because I'm an artist, I can actually say that now. I have a lot of other things that I'm involved with. I'm working with Lara Asol right now on a climate change project through Indigenous Eyes that's going to span another 3 years minimum. I've got a project going on with my friend John Endo Greenway around Nikai fishermen and internment and our people, our relationships together. These are projects, the one with John, we started back in 2015, I believe. And it's digging deeper into our stories and our relationships and histories, a deeper look at what happened to both our peoples through that time. And where the loss of fishing again. Most of my work's all based around fishing, water, island life.
I remembered the line. It's, how can you melt my clothes?
Jessica, Rosemary, I wanted to say thank you both so much for joining us on Below the Radar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Below the Radar is a knowledge democracy podcast originally created by SFU's Van City Office of Community Engagement. The Below the Radar B-sides are supported by Van City Credit Union. Thanks for listening to this episode with Rosemary Georgeson and Jessica Hallenbeck. Learn more about their work in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in.